Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the pre-conventional stages um, of the ego development theory model, which was developed by Dr. Susanne Cook-Greuter. As we've spoken last time, there are 9 stages. Today we're going to tackle the first part of them, the pre-conventional ones. All the stages are distributed across a bell curve, as you remember from if you have watched the introduction video that I did. Uh, you can find it here on my channel. The pre-conventional stages are in the beginning of the bell curve, which means they do not represent a big percentage of the population. And they're rarely encountered in adults. Mostly they are traversed throughout childhood and just left behind. However, they do reside in our memories. So we do have memories, we do have we have experienced them. So as I talk about these, maybe try to look back, or if you even have kids or teens that you're taking care of, I'm sure you will be very familiar with some of the things I'll talk about. But like I've said before, these stages are not necessarily tied to one specific part of your life or another. Sometimes you can get stuck. So that's what some people do. They get stuck at a stage. If the environment is not correct, it's not proper for evolution, or if they don't have proper support, or if they don't want to move on. So we're going to tackle some of these things today. So stay tuned. Now, at later stages, these pre-conventional stages that we're going to talk about, there are mainly 3, but there's like one that's more of a transition kind of stage. These 3 can all be accessed by people in later stages just to maximize their influence or their support that they give or that they receive. However, they're accessed in more skillful ways than just when you are at the stage, basically. So let's get started. The first stage is called symbiotic, and it's basically a symbiosis between the infant, which is, the lack of self, basically, and its mother. So for the infant, there is no permanence of objects or beings, or so for them, if something has disappeared from the baby's view, for example, the mother or the father, they think that it's gone forever. So they don't get the concept of it's in the next room, or right, as long as they don't see it, it's gone. So it's very crude. It's a very basic stage, and considering on this sort of model, which is a language-based model, it's very hard to map it because, yeah, it's mostly non-verbal or pre-verbal, mostly. So it's totally dependent on others. So we're not going to talk about it a lot. The second one is called the impulsive stage, where the self begins to emerge. You see children saying, "Me, mine, it's mine," right? Or me, I want to be the first one, or I want to do this, me, right? And what's characterized in this stage is just fulfillment on demand by others, right? So they're dependent on other people, but they want their needs fulfilled right now. So what they do is they do actions towards getting stuff, or getting basic needs mostly, but they don't really understand how that works or what exactly one needs. So it's quite fuzzy. Children, like I said, it's this is a stage where most young children are at, and it's a stage that's governed by impulses, which is why it's called impulsive, right? So they see a toy, I want it. They see a fruit, nice looking fruit, oh, I want it. So it's all about experiencing through your senses, basically. So the taste, the feel of it, the movement, everything is about the senses, right? The smell. Also, at this stage, punishment or reward is not necessarily connected with one's behavior. So it is perceived as random, or if it's punishment, it's seen as retaliatory, which is they don't understand why it happens. Language begins to emerge in kind of egocentric statements, such as "I want this, I want that, I want the apple, I want the candy, I want the doll, I want the car," stuff like that. It's all about the basic needs, of course. However, adults and children at this stage, yes, there may be some adults at this stage, however, they're mostly dependent, very dependent on others, easily overwhelmed. They feel abandoned, they feel the sense of insecurity and threat all the time. It's a profound sense of helplessness, like they can't do things, which is true because they don't know how things work. And other people are just ways to gratify the needs that one has. So they do judgments in very crude dichotomies, like, oh, good people give me things, right? If you give me that toy, you're good, but if you don't give it to me, you're bad. So it doesn't really matter if overall you are a good person or no. It's just based on that judgment. So it's very simple and very basic. And most adults at this stage just require legal guardians to actually decide stuff for them. So it's not a pretty picture with adults. Like I said, there's a main anxiety of a vague sense of threat and insecurity that just is all around and is ever present around them. So, and as far as language goes, like I said, it's very simple statements. Things are always either good or bad, they're clean or dirty, things are going well or not. So it's very black and white in that way. And there is no past tense. So it's always in the moment, right? So if you, like I said, if you give them a toy, oh great, you're a good guy. Later, if you by mistake you step on the toy, you're the bad guy, right? So it changes very much on moment to moment. They don't have a concept of past of, so it's very hard for them to understand these sort of things. Yes, so that's the impulsive stage. The next stage is called self-protective or opportunistic, which is, it has two names, and we'll get there. This is where the self actually develops a first-person perspective. So it has some concrete features of the self, with self being distinguished as describing what I want, right? So if I want a cookie, I'm the one that wants a cookie. So they begin to understand that others as well want stuff. So not only them, which is seen also in children and sometimes in teenagers. We'll see the stage covers quite a lot, and there's more adults at this stage than you would think. Now, this is a stage of differentiation, of emerging out of total dependence on your parents, on your, so you can, the child learns to do more things on their own. They're beginning to understand that others also have their wants, their things that they want to do. However, it's seen more as a competition, like they're competing for either material stuff like toys or affection, right? Or for space. Right? Oh, you're in my room, you need to leave, stuff like that. Or even power, which gets a little bit into a little bit higher up the scale, I would say. Language is basically more than one word sentences, which is kind of basic for children, right? and they begin to use symbols in their language, but they don't yet understand this cause and effect. So again, they don't get how the world works. They don't have the general rules of how that happens. And even adults at this stage, they use this sort of magical thinking. So just to make sense out of it, what happens, they don't know. So they invent, the mind fills up that blank, right? Now this stage is mostly prominent in very remote cultures, sometimes in prisons. So it's gangs, criminal organizations. So why is it split into opportunist and self-protection? So it's basically realization. So the opportunist realizes that it has physical strength or size in advantage. So it will use that to intimidate others and to get what they want, of course. Now, um, this really turns on aggression, which basically it stems from a very profound sense of uncertainty, of vulnerability, and even the fact that they just don't understand how the world works. That's the basic instinct that they go with, being aggressive. And this opportunist is more, you can imagine, being more physical, more intimidating. It's more seen in males. So men are most likely at this stage to be this sort of opportunistic. And women are more self-protective, because the self-protective are looking to protect themselves. They are not physically strong, so they cannot intimidate, they cannot really do that sort of do the same things that the opportunist does. However, they hide, so they become invisible, and they start having two faces. So they have an outward self, right? That is made to shield the real inner self. So they do that through all sorts of secrecy and deceit. People at this stage get into trouble, basically, because they don't really understand how the world works, and they see it as a hostile place filled with danger. So they follow the rules that they know, but it's mostly for immediate advantage. So if uh, someone tells them, for example, if you can imagine a child, right? They say, okay, if you uh, do your homework, you will get candy or you will get something. Then they will do it, but not because they know that the homework is important, but because they'll get the reward immediately after. So this sort of behavior is very, very prevalent in this stage, or to avoid punishment, right? So, oh, stop jumping on the bed, if you, or I will punish you. So they stop doing that. But as soon as you're gone, they start doing it again. So when they're caught, they are shameless. So they cannot be. You cannot use this sort of mechanism where you would think they would feel bad for what they did. They actually have very little remorse over the deeds that they do, because they do not understand if it's good or bad, as they do not have a sense of that yet. Sometimes they rely on luck tokens and, like I said, magical thinking. And because they have no understanding of causality, what causes what, and how the world works, they're also very irresponsible. So they don't take responsibility in their own actions. They choose dangerous jobs, as in daring, for example, test pilots, firefighters, prison guards, stuff like that, where One's ability to intimidate is basically the and physical strength is the advantage. In interpersonal relationships, they create a lot of friction because of not knowing the rules, basically, and hurt feelings as well. Also, they have this sort of I win, you lose kind of mentality. And others might think that they are quite unpredictable and unreasonable, which is kind of interesting as logic, as I said, there's no cause and effect, so logic has absolutely no possibility of working. If you ever have tried to reason with a child, you will see that it does not work. If, for example, a child says, I want to wear my t-shirt today, and you tell them, but it's winter outside, there's snow, you will be cold, it's raining, it's right. You give them all these sort of valid reasons for not doing the thing that they want, and you need to put a jacket on, you need to, and they will refuse it. They will just refuse it outright, not do it because not because they don't. Uh, so it's a will game, right? They want this, and this is what they want. It's not. They cannot understand the logical arguments that you're providing. Yeah, they're sometimes they can also be, if they're the self-protective side with two very two-faced, right? One inner self which wants some stuff, and the outer self which can put on a mask and do all these sort of lies and deceit. They can be also very manipulative and exploitative. In career, they can get quite successful if it's for example, if it's a field where you need to have a good nose for opportunities and not necessarily um, long-term goals. So if it's very immediate kind of things that are happening, then they can get really good at that. But a place where they struggle is basically relationships because they're not well. They don't do well in social networks. They don't understand any subtle human interaction. So all they see is a power play, basically. So the relationships are very volatile and they blow up very quickly because of, let's say, silly reasons when you look at it from another point of view. And all the feelings are just projected outwards. They don't, all of the emotions that are expressed, except happiness, probably, they're all filtered through this aggressive kind of behavior. So they all come out as anger. They have a lack of emotions, basically, of a variety of emotions, and there's no inner reflection because yeah, they can't do that yet. Because they live in this world where everything is dangerous. Showing any sort of weakness is very dangerous, and they also see this as in showing information about yourself, for example, as the self-protective one, for example, where they have a very big shield, right? The outer self, and the inner self is protected, right, by this. So they don't say information about themselves. They try to keep very quite secretive about what they do or what they like or what their pastimes are. Just kind of this thing where, oh, the more people know about me, the more they can take advantage of me, which is what they usually do. So it's very projecting in that sort of way. So yeah, this aggressive behavior is presents itself as a general hostility towards anyone. This fight or flight kind of responses to everything. However, when you're considering the social kind of nature of our work, everything we do is quite social. They need to rely on people. So how do they do that? Of those that work, for example, as a test pilot, as a prison guard, firefighter, this sort of dangerous professions, right? They have their buddies, their colleagues, and they rely on them based on a pact of of mutual kind of protection. Now, this sort of manipulative and self-serving behavior obviously is not good, but it's not because they don't want, they shouldn't want to do it, it's because they don't understand why they shouldn't do it. So it's a lack of understanding that is underneath all of this behavior. Yeah, it's very concrete and dichotomous thinking. It's very black and white. And this sort of attitude where you're either with me or you're against me from moment to moment. So it's very, very volatile relationships, like I've said. And they have a fear that someone else might be trying to dominate them, to control them, to lie to them, to deceive them, which is what they do most of the time. So this is what they try to dominate people, to gain control over the situation, and to get an advantage with deception. Yeah, they have trouble getting um, long-term goals, and understanding that, or trying to understand that a person is more than what they want, is also this sort of psychology is very, very advanced for them. They don't understand it. When it comes to others and their problems, they are quite uncaring. They don't care if they're not directly involved. They won't care. They won't be. Uh, they won't believe. They will say they are deceived. Right? So that'll be their first assumption. So they won't do anything about larger problems, the world's problems. As long as it's not my problem, I don't care. It's your problem. Deal with it. Also, the defense mechanism, as I told, because they're trying to shield this very fragile self that is just emerging out of dependence, they they blame others for everything that's happening. So they don't take any responsibility. They blame others, and all they want to do is enjoy with their senses. So eating good food, tasting good, so basic needs, just the basic needs, just indulging with the senses. That's what they like. Like I said, they're projecting. Every feeling is expressed towards others as anger, and very bullheaded. Right? You cannot reason with them because they don't understand reason. Have this sort of tunnel vision, and yeah, you'll see in adults that are kind of either, as we've spoken in the introduction, which I think is a very important episode and you should watch it. Sometimes you can regress stages. So you'll see some adults that have this sort of biting humor that kind of pokes at the weaknesses of others, and just surfaces them just a little bit, just to make them uncomfortable, just to give them a little bit of an edge, to feel superior, which is very, very characteristic of this stage. They're very concerned with concrete things, right? So, like I said, they're thrilled by bodily sensations and senses. Very prejudiced. They have talent for polarizing arguments, right? Because all their judgments are from moment to moment. So one time is him, the other one. So it's very, very, very unpredictable behavior. The language itself is, like I said, is very dichotomous. Things are either good or bad. They are um, right, wrong, fun, boring. They're this. It's just two positions. That's it. When speaking, language usually has very negative affects, like very sarcastic, very um, disappointed, kind of angry, aggressive, kind of passive aggressive kind of language. And the way of saying things is always with this sort of negative kind of affect to it. Sentences are very short. They don't elaborate, don't explain what they said because they can't. There's no reason behind it. So, and feelings are quite basic. Oh, I'm feeling sick, I'm upset, I'm happy, I'm excited, I'm mad, I'm so it's quite basic in that sense, which is kind of expected from this sort of stage. Now, that was the third stage of the pre-conventional stages. There is one more stage which is called Delta 3, which is kind of a rule-oriented person. It is a transition phase towards the conventional stages. So I think it's a very important one to mention. In this stage, basically, the person develops a second person perspective. So they see, for example, they see that others see them as well. So they kind of start to understand that, oh, they also see what I do, what I like, what I look like. So if I want something from someone, basically, I need to make myself appealing to that person. There's a very big cognitive differentiation. It happens from the previous stage, this self-protective and opportunistic kind of individual, to this rule-based thinking, which basically is the logical link for mental growth. Now, people at this stage kind of vacillate between two points of view. They cannot have both at the same time, so it's either one or the other. And the points of view are basically, how do you look to me and how do I look to you? So sometimes they're shifting between the two, but they cannot think of both at the same time. And they start to recognize the external differences in presentation, self-presentation, for example, and behavior. And this usually happens when people start getting more social, right? It is one of the things that is induced by school and by socializing at school. For children, for example, or yeah, if it's adults at that stage, you can imagine. As I said, it's prison cultures and very criminal-like activities that have sort of the previous stage. So yeah, at school, for example, children, they want to they start having this will to fit in and to make friends, to be liked. So in order to do that, you need to know what the rules are. What are the social conventions for this sort of objective, right? So one of the first things that they do is they start to create a likeness to others, right? They want to be attractive. They want to wear kind of the same clothes. They want to have the same sort of behaviors, right? So they start adopting this sort of we'll see, this is kind of the precursor to the next stage, which we'll talk about in the next episode. So by following the rules, it's kind of a circle, right? By following the rules, they learn to have more acceptance and the protection of the group, right? And by doing that, they gain more trust in this world and how it works. So for them, rules represent respect. So as you respect the norms, you gain more respect in the group, and also by you give respect to others by noticing that they they follow the rules, right? And they um, you notice how they act, you notice how they look, you notice that they're doing the right things, that they're following this sort of dogmatic kind of rules, right? And it's another breakthrough because they discovered the possibility of feedback. Huh, I can actually ask someone what they think, and they will tell me. However, it's very kind of basic, right? It is a milestone in social interaction, but it's very basic, as in they do it one variable at a time. So it's not very advanced in that sort of sense. And they find comfort in this sort of likeness to others, and the fact that they're not alone in this world. Oh, there's other people who like the same things I do, who do the same things I do, so we're quite alike. We're kind of a group, right? They find this sort of comfort in the group. So here is where kids with similar interests or hobbies, or even adults at this stage, they bond together over interests, over hobbies, into groups or clubs or whatever these sort of organizations. So they do simple factual statements over concrete, very concrete things. They try to avoid getting in trouble, which is why they respect the rules, right? They start to respecting the rules, but they're of very uncertain on how to do that and how to do that every time. So they have this. It's still some sort of uncertainty there, and sometimes when you'll ask them if they've done something wrong, they will know that they have, but they can't really say what or why or how, in what way they did it wrong. So it's still this. Still a lack of insight and a lack of understanding why the rules are there, but they still kind of it's an evolution basically compared to the previous stage. So yeah, those are the pre-conventional stages. We'll get into the conventional stages in the post-conventional and all of the other stages in a further episode. Yeah, stay tuned, and if you like this, like, subscribe, share it with your friends, or comment down below. I think it's quite an important, even though this model, this ego development theory is based on language and is mostly for adults to understand adult development. I think also these first stages are quite important to understand, and to the fact that we can understand children better, I think is will make the relationships a lot easier to manage. Of course, there are other models which are also good at for this sort of children's psychology. But yeah, this one is, I think, quite interesting. So yeah, stay tuned for the next stages. Things will get more interesting from here. And thanks for watching. See you in the next one. All the best.